thank this hard-working jury for their service to the public, their quest for justice, and their personal sacrifice of their time and effort. We are not at all upset with them, and neither should the public be upset. They did the best they could. We ask the public to remain calm and patient because we are confident there will be another trial with a different jury. We are calm. You should be calm.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, asking for calm in the wake of the mistrial of Officer William Porter in Baltimore. Joining us now to talk about that and more is the great Andy McCarthy, former federal prosecutor, National Review columnist, best-selling author. Hello, Andy.
Hey, Steve. How are you? Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you. I'm doing well. All right, so let's talk about this. You wrote a great piece at National Review, the Travesty in Baltimore, and you talk about so many things. I want to start with the fact that this case should never have been brought in the first place.
Yeah, well, there's no evidence of a crime, and when you don't have enough evidence even to make out probable cause for an arrest, you don't indict people where you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a much higher standard under much more difficult conditions. The defendant gets a lawyer. There's all kinds of privileges he gets under the law. If you don't have enough evidence to arrest someone, you don't bring a case like this to trial. But this has been a politicized prosecution from the first. It's not about law. It's not about facts. It's not about evidence. It's about a social justice narrative. So that being the case, and the people who scripted the narrative not being satisfied, I imagine we're up for Act 2 soon.
Yeah, well, now, you also point out, Andy, as a former federal prosecutor, that when there are multiple trials involved, the prosecution will always start with what it considers to be its strongest case. We don't know the split of the jury, as you point out in the piece, whether it was one holdout either way. We just have no idea. But they couldn't even get a conviction on misconduct, let alone manslaughter, in what they considered to be their strongest case.
Right. Well, again, Steve, it's because there's no evidence. This case was brought because of the prosecutor, who is much more of a demagogue than a state's attorney, said as much when she said that she brought the charges because she heard the mob's cries for no justice, no peace. We now know that she rushed the charges herself rather than allowing people who actually knew what they were doing to complete their investigation. And when you do something like that, you have a woeful mess, which is what basically she has presented. And what she's had to do in order to try to, keep this show running along is essentially hold back the exculpatory evidence from the defendants, because that would have shown even more powerfully, not only that there's a lack of evidence, but that these people are affirmatively innocent. So, I think it's going to go poorly for her, except that, they have created this atmosphere of intimidation. So it's always possible that you won't get enough good, strong people who will hold out and say, if there's no evidence, I'm ethically bound to convict.
All right,
look, all the defense lawyers now know all the bad stuff in the government's case. Unlike the last time. She can't sandbag them again.
So that's a big advantage. Also, it's a big advantage for the defendant in the case scheduled to start first week in January, because they were reportedly going to turn this guy after his conviction, turn Porter against the van driver. But that isn't going to happen, at this point. It doesn't look that way, right?
Right. No, that's exactly right. So, the idea was win the case that you had a strong case on, and then hopefully try to roll him against the others, because they don't have a case against the other people either. It's not a good thing to indict people in the hope that somewhere along the line a witness will drop the sky.
You would think. All right, I want to move on to another piece that you wrote yesterday, I believe, and that we saw a lot of this at the debate, Cruz versus Rubio, and you're talking about the battle between the two of them on immigration. You like both of them. You think they're both very talented and have a lot to offer. But then you talk about surveillance, and as you put it, on surveillance, I think they're arguing over an empty bag. How so?
Well, I think on Rubio's side, he's a big champion of the NSA's metadata collection program. And I am too. I was a big supporter of that program. But what we now know about how it was actually executed, they only got about 30% of the phone records. Or for all the talk about domestic spying and they know your every move, it turns out that the vast majority of the records they didn't get. And even worse, the ones they're missing are the kind of communications vehicles that terrorists are most likely to exploit, like, cell phones and internet traffic and the like. So they're not in the database. And if you don't have the complete database, you're not going to, you can't exploit the program for what it's designed to do, which is to map terrorist organizations. That's another thing I don't understand about the position of Rubio and Christie and people who are, like me, favorably disposed toward this program. As we argued again and again, the idea of the program is not to prevent specific terrorist attacks. You can always hope that will happen, but what we're trying to do is amass intelligence to work with other intelligence in order to get a full mosaic of the threat. And I think it's unfortunate to see these guys use something like San Bernardino to suggest that, all the people who didn't like this program, they're responsible for what happened there, because that's just foolish. But I think Cruz is, I don't agree with Cruz on this either, even though I support him. To the extent he says that the USA Freedom Act has improved the program and that that it's better now than it was before, it's weaker than it was before.
Right.
He says that we're now going after all the phones. Right. There's nothing we can do under the USA Freedom Act that we couldn't do before.
Andy, I appreciate it. Merry Christmas to you, sir. Thank you for joining us again.
Steve.
The great Andy McCarthy. All right, the Malzberg panel is next. And remember to tune in tonight to catch my colleague J.D. Hayworth's interview with Sarah Palin on Newsmax Prime. That's tonight, 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. Eastern.